But the show is so great, and just by the reviews and what we've been talking about, just because of the characters and the story. Moon Knight's awesome when he's in action. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah.
But man, the what we've been talking about, what we've been alluding to, referencing, that's the heart of this show so far.
Greetings, travelers.
Greetings, travelers, and welcome to Travelers into the Multiverse. Before we get started, my name is Tucker Wallace, but most importantly, I have my best friend, Christian Franklin, co-traveler, co-host, co-spoilers. We're gonna be breaking down episode 3, but I asked Christian if I could start this episode off because, guys, if you're watching this, just know that life gets hard. And episode 4 of our normal podcast of our Tuesday Traveler Tuesday, I missed that, but bro, I was pretty tired. I was having one of those Mark/Steven moments, just worn out. What is my name, Bucker or Tucker? Ducker.
Check Instagram for that for more context. But
Christian said some hilarious memes, but I just wanted to get that out of the way. Christian, what are we doing in this episode?
Well, first off, it's not Tucker's fault at all. I was trying to get episode 4 uploaded and I was taking forever. So I take blame on that. So you guys will be getting that soon. Tucker is killing it with the editing. He is working his tail off. He's got like 4,000 things on his plate. I just cannot commend the guy enough for what he does and for how much he cares about what he does. It's just crazy. But what we're going to be doing is we're just going to jump right into a spoiler discussion for Moon Knight Episode 3, now streaming on Disney Plus. And man, part of this hectic week, whether it's work, whether it's even school, whether it's life, family, you got to make time for Marvel Disney Plus show, man. You got to make time for that. You got to get up early. I was watching it early this morning. I know Tucker got to watch it today on his lunch break, whenever this episode airs, current real time. But man, dude, I mean, if you want to hear an initial reaction, before we get into spoilers, man, I mean, these episodes just keep getting better, better, and better. I mean, personally, I loved the third episode. Some people said it was good, but not as good as the first 2. I disagree. I think it was just from what I've seen on the internet, because the internet, everyone's got subjective opinion. But I think this is the best episode so far.
Yeah. And
I'm really excited just to see more action. This was definitely more action packed and just more character building, more Mark Spector and Stephen Grant banter between the two. Definitely more of a focus on Mark Spector, which I was wanting. So those are just the initial reactions I had. Tucker, I mean, what'd you think, man?
Yeah, first reactions, just like definitely. I felt like when it was almost over, I was like, man, I really wish this was longer. And these episodes are 45 to 1 hour long. They're a good, a great length, but overall, like, amazing. I think this was definitely my favorite one so far because, if this was a movie, this would be like hitting towards the middle because we're halfway through. This is, we have 3 episodes left to fold out the rest of the story. I heard someone once recently tell me that, episode 1, it was really boring. And, but I think a lot of this comes from a place of like, it's character building. I like what you said there. I think that was so great. It is character building. It's building up. One, you got to figure out who is Steven. You kind of learn who he is. Mm-hmm. You learn that there is Mark, and you learn about Moon Knight, and then you're learning more about, Steven, Moon Knight, Mark, and which is kind of cool. So now it's like we've got all these developed. There's so much that happened in this episode. And so what's one of the first spoilers you think that as we like dive into this that really stuck out?
Yeah, good spoiler warning. Yeah, I was kidding. A little countdown here. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah,
3, 2, 1.
3, 2, 1. Yeah, there you go. But no, absolutely. So from the beginning, we actually are, we have some sources just online that we want to attribute to. So they make these observations, but we kind of want to capitalize on those. But from the very beginning, what's interesting with Layla, so we open on a scene with Layla actually getting her passport, getting a passport made so she can go to, I believe it's Cairo, Egypt, and she can try to catch up with Mark, who, remember, at the end, end of episode 2, Khonshu takes Mark to Egypt. At least the Mark personality, and then of course Stephen Grant is inside, but he's just chilling out for the moment. So Mark is in control. Khonshu, right, the Egyptian god, takes Mark Spector to Cairo, Egypt, and now Layla, right? We learned who Layla is in episode 2. She's wanting to follow suit, so she is getting a passport made. And I don't know who I can't remember exactly who the person was making her, is forging a passport, a fake one for her. I can't remember.
That too. I couldn't figure if it was a grandmother or
grandma, or maybe a family relative. Now, this person who was making the passport for Layla did reference her father, Layla's father.
That's right.
Who, this is interesting. So we're talking spoilers here. There is a correlation that we can see in the older Moon Knight comics. Now, it wasn't the Layla character herself, but it was a character named Marlene. And Marlene's father was also an archaeologist. So I think what Disney Plus is doing, or Marvel Studios, what they're doing is they're taking inspiration from some of the older Moon Knight comics with the Marlene character. And Layla is filling that role. And then they both have the correlation that, their fathers were very esteemed archaeologist, right? Working a lot in archaeology and discovering artifacts and ancient tombs and all these different things. So that's kind of a cool little Easter egg there if you do your research on it. I won't spend too much time on it, but also I was reading, so we're kind of reading from some websites here. I did also want to make notice of this one too. So Layla's identification in her passport, it says it was issued in 2021. Meaning she would have gotten it 3 years into the blip. The blip occurred, remember, 2018. So while everyone returned in 2023, does that mean that Layla was dusted by the snap? She was still alive? I mean, of course, that's something that's not entirely answered or even expounded upon in the show. But that was kind of interesting too. There's a freeze frame. You can see the passport 2021. So that's during the time of the blip, because the blip takes place over 5 years, 2018 to 2023. Because we have to remember, guys, that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe now, we are in 2023, 2024, those years. So we're kind of like in the future from what we are right now in 2022, just because of the blip. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But Tucker, I mean, what are some other things you picked up on, or maybe that you've read?
Well, whether this is Grandma Layla or just a great aunt, I mean, I want one of her in my life. I mean, to be able to make a perfect passport. I mean, my wife and I, Meg, we just got back from we went out of the country for about a week, came back and going through customs. So just the idea that there's a lady that can duplicate that. I'm sure someone's at home thinking, I'm going to try this Photoshop, but I mean, all the details. So I thought that was pretty cool. One of the other Easter eggs that we were going to, in that scene, is that it talked about how Layla's father, if she's kind of like a replica in a sense of her father, it talks about the comic book story of her father, Dr. Peter Runes. It says that he was killed after discovering Khonshu's lost tomb. So I don't know if that's going to hint, if this could be a foreshadowing of maybe her character. I would hope not, because, as we've seen, and we'll probably discuss this in a little bit, but her and Steven, they have a little bit of, it seemed like a little growing relationship versus her relationship with Mark is not so great. And so it's kind of funny that she has a relationship with that same human being, but like the actual soul or personality or whatever it is, they don't explain that. I'm not sure how that's happening. I don't, and maybe that is it really that he is, I want to know more about that. Like, how is Mark and Steven living in one body?
Yeah, dude, you made a really good point, because I was thinking about that towards the end of the episode, which we'll dive more into this episode even towards the end. But the relationship between Layla and Mark is very rocky. But you start to see when Steven takes over in the couple times this episode to perform a task or to give some knowledge about something, right? Because Mark is kind of, you ever heard that term, the brains and the brawn? Well,
Yep.
Mark is the skilled mercenary. He's a skilled fighter. He knows how to operate firearms, all these different things. Well, Steven is just kind of like your, go lucky, innocent, nerdy type, but he's highly intelligent. He studied Egyptian mythology and archaeology and all these things. So at specific points in the episode, Mark reluctantly says, "All right, Steven, you got to come out, and help me with this."
Yeah.
But we see, I love that you made that point with Layla, that hers and Mark's relationship, because we find out that they are married, currently trying to get a divorce. It's very rocky. But then you see this other side, right? It's the same person, right? It's the same person. Yeah. But you see Steven come out, and she's very, like, she seems to get along with him pretty well, and it gets to know him more. So I wonder if that's going to play a role in, like, Layla and the Mark Steven character falling back in love, because there's a side to Mark that Layla's never known, and that's Steven. But he's calm, he's sweet, he's good natured, and he's got more of a moral compass, and he upholds ethics. Seems like more than Mark does. Now, I don't want to assume too much, like Mark is just all brawn and wants to kill. I mean, obviously, if the situation calls for it, he's going to do it. But I love that you made that point. So we'll have to see what happens there with that relationship. But I did want to say this. So we kind of fast forward, and now we actually get to see other Egyptian gods in play. Now we see their avatars, right? So avatars are basically people that are standing in for the gods. And we're not talking about the Avatar movie with the blue creatures, which is kind of the same, I guess, kind of the same concept there. But what we're seeing here is that the Egyptian gods are now coming into play. Khonshu is summoning the gods for a trial for Arthur Harrow. But then the gods actually send their avatars. So just like Mark, Spectre, and Steven are, they are the avatar singular for Khonshu. Now we're seeing the other Egyptian gods like Horus, Isis, Osiris. We don't actually see them, but we see their avatars, the people that are like their representatives, their ambassadors for them, that they currently have, the gods currently have chosen to be their representatives for them. So then we see that Khonshu, he even tells Steven, he's like, I'm risking a lot summoning the gods for this trial. I'm risking imprisonment and stone to assemble the gods and kind of rile them up, because they don't like to be disturbed. They don't want to meddle in human affairs. That's what he says. But, Mark, Steven, Khonshu, even Layla, they're all like, hey, Arthur Harrow, this Ethan Hawke guy, he's bad news.
Yeah.
He's bad news. He's coming to Cairo. He's trying to uncover the tomb of Amet. It's going to get bad. It's going to get really bad. And so we see this trial. So the gods are like, okay, all right, let's bring Arthur Harrow in. Let's see what's going on. So Arthur walks in, and I just knew that it was going to be a situation where it's like he's playing dumb, no idea what he's, they don't have an idea of what Arthur Harrow's actually trying to do. And so, I mean, I'm kind of ranting on right now, Tucker, but like, what'd you think about that scene? I enjoyed it. It was kind of cool seeing all that unravel.
It's kind of cool, like, kind of understanding, like, so these ancient Egyptian gods are living through these avatars of different humans. Like, they don't want to meddle within human stuff. So kind of like wondering, maybe makes me wonder, like, what some of their purpose is of shaping history. But I wanted to make a note in our source here, and it did stick out to me, and I know it did to you. I saw a meme about it, so before I watched the episode. But remember when they were on the rooftop and they're fighting, and all of a sudden, I think Mark loses control, and he comes back, and there's people dead. And he looks down at the blade, and he's like, Steven, he's like, it's not me. Yeah, that wasn't me. And so on this meme that I saw online, it talked about there being another person called Jake Lockley. And this is what this source says as well. But so that I really want to know more about how these personality works. Like, is it literally just one person who that has been with Layla, and also maybe when they were getting there, in the process of the divorce, maybe that's when he unleashed Steven somehow in his personality disorder, and then maybe it's going to release another one. Has it always been Mark, and then it breaks off into Steven? But then again, and maybe that's when Steven started working, or Mark started working at the museum. I want to know more about that. But that was one thing I noted. Seeing all the gods was really cool. Seeing how they kind of take over and him yell like Kanji was yelling through Mark. That was pretty cool. Yeah, Ethan, Arthur, his haircut, bro. Creepy dude. I've seen him in other stuff, and he's an incredible actor. So that was my take on the gods, and just the idea, the possibility of there being another personality with inside Mark and Steven. So
yeah, that's a great observation. I'm actually glad you brought that up. I think I might have skipped over that, so I'm glad you tapped on that, because there is discussion, because it's not just limited to, if you read the comics. Now, I'm not like a scholar on Moon Knight, but I'm familiar with the character, and I've seen him in team ups and all that from the other comic books that I have read growing up. Moon Knight was a character that was very prominent in the Marvel Comics universe. Now he's beginning to be prominent in the MCU, which I'm so happy about. But Jake Lockley, right? I mean, he was another version, right? Another, someone who harnessed the identity of Moon Knight. And so when people saw pictures leaked of episode 3 with, I saw this on many pages, people were speculating, is Jake Lockley going to be coming into play as well? Well, you see Oscar Isaac walking around set. He's got this black baseball cap on. It kind of looks similar to Jake Lockley in the comic book. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because we don't know. I mean, that could be teased, or at least that could be an Easter egg. I don't know. So that's really cool. But yeah, seeing this this dual identity arise, and possibly even a third identity, or maybe even a fourth. I don't know.
It makes me so curious.
Yeah, it really does. It's really neat. But that's one thing I really do appreciate about what the MCU is trying to do within representation. And we're not talking about we're talking specifically about just different struggles that people have, or maybe different backgrounds in which people come. And the MCU now is really trying to encompass that, and trying to give us more representation in those areas with medical conditions, or whatever the case is. I think that's really neat.
I do too, yeah.
So anyway, we go back to this trial by Arthur Harrow. Long story short, he's being put on this trial. He's stating his case. Say, hey, look, I'm just here, just exploring, just minding my own business. Well, we all know what he's really doing. He's really trying to get to the tomb of Ammit, to unleash the power, to unleash chaos, all these different things, the typical villain trope. Well, he makes his state he states his case pretty well. And then he turns it, going back to this duality, he turns it on to Mark Spector, who says, this man right here is very ill. He's sick. He is unwell. You remember that? He turns it on to Mark. He's like, Mark has no idea what's going on. He's so internally conflicted with his alter ego.
And he agrees. He agrees that he
agrees. That's what's so interesting. You would think Mark is going to say, no, I'm good. But he actually agrees, like, hey, I'm unwell. I need help. And so that does not go well for them, though, because now the gods who are in this trial, they're like, okay, well, Khonshu's really disappointing us here. He's really wasting our time. He's got this avatar of his who's really wasting our time, trying to accuse this innocent person who is Arthur Harrow. Yeah, it's just a waste of time. And so they're like, hey, okay, meeting adjourned. You go on your separate ways, that kind of thing. And it's just, And so, yeah, Arthur Harrow gets away with it, right? He gets away, he gets off scot-free. And it's kind of interesting how they really jumped into that, like towards the beginning of the episode, maybe towards the beginning, mid, like all this kind of happens. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting. But kind of talking about the Easter egg side of it, and then I'll shut up for a second and let Tucker give more wisdom. Man. But what's interesting is like I was telling Tucker this before. I'm pretty familiar with the older Thor comics. I'm talking about the older Thor, like back in the 60s, kind of like what they kind of deem the golden age of comic books, especially with DC Comics. So you have a lot of these older runs that actually still have ran for years and years and years after, even the Amazing Spider-Man series, even from the 60s. It would go through different variants, right? But still would keep up that storyline and that narrative. But what's interesting here is that some of these gods, the Egyptian gods, have actually appeared in other Marvel comics. As it says here, Horus, Isis, Osiris, and many others have actually appeared in specifically the Thor comics. Now, obviously, it's the Thor comics just because mythology plays a huge part into the Thor, Thor's canon, Loki. You all know Loki, right? Probably the
goddess of mischief,
most god of mischief, most charming villain of the MCU, right? Villain. I call him an anti-hero just because he's not. He thinks he's a hero, right? Yeah. But you have all this mythology into play, and so back in the original Thor run, now this is when Thor actually was a regular human being. I don't know if you remember this, Tucker, because the MCU has taken it to the approach that Thor has been around for thousands of years. The Norse mythology that you study about and just fantasize about sometimes, well, it exists for real in the MCU. However, in the original Thor comics, and I'm going to get to this here in a second, Donald Blake, a human, actually wields the hammer. So he's a crippled doctor who wields the hammer and becomes Thor. Donald Blake. So that's also an Easter egg in the first Thor. When he's given his human name when he first comes to Earth, he's given the name Donald Blake, and that's a callback.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, so you have to look that up. So that's another Easter egg for another movie. But with all this mythology of Thor, they're incorporated a lot of overlap in correlation with the Egyptian gods. So we see Horus, Isis, Osiris, all these different gods in the original Thor comics. So what's interesting about Moon Knight, even though the character of Moon Knight himself may not be that old, or as we say old, or may not have been around as long as the IP characters, the original popular Marvel characters. It's clear that the seeds and the roots of Moon Knight have been here for many, many years in the past.
That's cool. That's really
so. It's kind of cool. I thought that was a kind of cool little Easter egg. But Tucker, what were some more stuff that we found interesting? Episode 3.
One funny thing is, you joke about how since I wear my hat backwards, it's the backwards hat club. But we all know, true Marvel fans know that every MCU character, it seems like at some point is going to wear a hat. And so, was it the third personality coming out of Mark and Steven, or was it just, him trying to kind of go undercover and wearing a hat like all the MCU characters do?
Yeah.
But seeing like when Layla's going to find her friend that he knows, looks like there's some history going on there. Seeing, I don't know if they would be what you call dueling or whatever with the horses and the staffs or the rods. That was really cool.
Oh, you're talking about jousting?
Yeah. Jousting.
Kind of like jousting. It's a medieval, form of combat. I've seen jousting in person. It's really cool. But I told it. Yeah.
Really don't have a lot to say about that, but just that it was really cool. I like seeing this guy's character. The fact he wore this like kind of royal like bathrobe. But it really, this episode really shows you the importance of Steven because of his background and knowledge of all this ancient history and artifacts. It really comes to play in this episode where Mark has to release control and say, okay, like I got to let you take over so we can figure this out. And especially leading up to when him and Conchu were all, I guess you'd say, Layla, Mark Steven, and Conchu, when they're, going to turn back the stars,
Ooh,
which
yeah.
was so cool visually to see that.
Yeah. I want to say one thing, what you're talking about, when they go meet Layla's connection that has the artifacts or at least the pieces that they need. That actor, actually, he's the one that passed away. And I believe it was the skiing accident. So we wanted to, give respect to him and his family for that, because I'd read headlines. They said Moon Knight actor tragically killed in accident. This is like a month or two ago. And even my mom told me about it. She said, did you see this? That one of these Marvel actors. And so I thought, like, oh, like Avenger or something. But it was like from the Moon Knight show. And I can't remember the actor's name, or I can't pronounce it correctly, but he was the character that you could tell he was very wealthy, wore a robe around, right? And all of that. So I think they give credit to him. And the end credits, like this is for you, so and so. So I appreciate that part, but things escalate quickly, and the turning of the sky. That's kind of interesting when you look into the sky, because what they're trying to do with the pieces. So what they're trying to do is Mark and Layla and Steven, Conchu. They're trying to discover the location of Amit's tomb before Arthur Harrow can get there. Now, they have to use specific they want it the pieces they're trying to get is going to create a map of a constellation that's going to point them in the direction they need to go. So that's what they're trying to find out. Well, you're right, Tucker. It's so cool to see Steven come out and take over the body of Mark. They switch off. Mm-hmm. But to see him utilize his intelligence of these specific things, it's so useful. Sometimes it's like it's kind of weird. I want to make this connection here. It's like sometimes the things that we know, some random things that we know, or maybe some tidbits, I don't know. We may think, oh, they're completely useless. Well, in this situation, when they needed to find, when they're needing to find this tomb to save the world from chaos, right? Steven's useful knowledge and his expertise and these things that he's been around so long at his job at the museum and what he studies on the side, it comes into play. I think, the Word of God, right? We study the Word of God, and sometimes I think it's like we really need to take in consideration that we need to learn as much of the Word of God as possible, the historical narrative, the details. I'm not saying you have to know every single little detail, right? Paul would write to Titus about that. He's like, do not start contentions and all that. Don't worry about having down the genealogies to a T. But I think it's really important that knowledge is so it's key, and it's a factor, right? And I think knowledge sometimes people kind of obscure it. Maybe they kind of look at it not as important, but knowledge in specific areas. And if you're passionate about something and knowledgeable, I think it can really serve you a good purpose. Just personally, but then we get to the idea, and I know I'm ranting a lot, Tucker, I'll let you chime in here, but I think it's kind of neat how with the pieces they form of a map, the map shows this constellation. And to get to the part where Conchu does turn back the sky, which is really cool. This kind of plays into the idea of astrology and horoscopes. Now, this is very obscure because we've actually mentioned on our recent episodes that some of these ideologies and some of these doctrines in today's society are being taught in such ways. Like we talked a little bit about Calvinism, right? Mm-hmm. It made doctrine from the about the 17th century, late 16th century, early 17th century. Calvinism was coming into play. This show kind of has a little bit of Calvinism in it. We see, and now with this episode, I kind of picked up on the idea of horoscopes and astrology. So we won't get too much into that, but I think there's a little bit of astrology there because it's basically utilizing the sun and the stars, right? You have the god of the sun with Egypt. You have the stars aligning and pointing you one way and directing you one way. Many people today utilize the sun and the stars actually as a religious deity or religious deities to point them in directions of life. They disregard the teachings of Scripture, or they even disregard a higher being, whatever they believe, and they follow the sun and the stars. They believe the stars align into a certain position to guide them in a certain aspect of life. So we're not talking about astrology here, but I think there was a little bit of tidbit kind of showing that, because when we see Khonshu having to turn back the sky, and also you mentioned that too. Again, he even tells Mark and Steven, hey, if I turn back the sky, it's done with me. Like, I'm gonna be imprisoned. The gods are not going to put up with this. And what happens, Tucker?
Yep. He becomes the next trophy.
Yep. Yeah. And it's almost like you see a kind of a side of Khonshu, like, hey, there's a greater good.
Yeah.
He's kind of portrayed, Khonshu is, he's kind of portrayed as a little bit of a jerk in the show. But then he knows that there's a greater purpose and that they have to find this tomb before Arthur Harrow does, even though everyone else is saying, oh, Arthur's not that bad of a guy. He's just minding his own business. He's just a religious dude. Yeah. He's just strong in his faith, quote unquote. But Khonshu says, hey, look, I'm going to turn back the sky, but this is going to cost me. You're going to have to do this without me. Yeah. And so that's what I'm really interested in seeing. Now we're going to see, hopefully more Moon Knight, of course, because that's the title of the show, Moon Knight. But man, like Khonshu, right, is giving Mark and Steven the power, so to speak. He's giving them the abilities. Now without Khonshu, what's going to happen, right? How are they going to play out? So I don't know. I'm just kind of ranting right now, but
no, I mean, so
great.
One thing that you said, my internet's acting a little funny, but Scripture talks about 1 Peter 3:15. Make sure in your hearts that Christ is Lord. Always be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks you about the hope that you have. Be ready to give a defense. And it's kind of like just thinking about Mark and Steven. Like, Steven's been collecting all this random artifacts, random knowledge of all, at the museum he's worked at. It's a perfect place for him. And they even joke about him giving tours there because, he knows so much. And it's like, it's always the weirdest times that your most random knowledge comes into play. But, regards our faith, it's like, knowing the little gritty stuff, knowing the stuff, the history, the deeper meanings, the Greek, and not that you have to be scholars and all that, but just knowing that really can help grow your faith and be able to say, this is exactly why I believe this historically, miraculously, because of what the Holy Spirit did through these men, being passed down. I mean, we're 2,000 plus years later from then. So I think it's pretty cool. But, going to Khonshu, the fact that he saw enough in them with Mark, Steven, and Layla to be like, okay, like, I've got to do this one thing. And if we do it, I won't be with you anymore. I know what's going to happen. It does raise the question, will Mark and Steven both be able to turn into Moon Knight if Khonshu is not, like, if he's now that he's in his stone statue, do they still have the powers to do that? Which definitely raises that question. But yeah, this episode, it's leaving. I can't wait. I can't wait for next week.
Yeah. One thing I want to say about that, I don't want to bore our listeners or viewers, but one thing, an excellent observation. It's like, and probably a prediction too. For the future episodes, we've got 3 more, I believe. Yep. 6-part episode, 3 more. How are they going to how are they going to try to do all this without Khonshu? Yeah. Think about Iron Man 3. Whatever you think about Iron Man 3, it's one of them. It's universally panned with some people. It's a great movie in some people's eyes, whatever the case is. I did appreciate, though, with Iron Man 3, I almost walked out of the theater the first time because of the the Mandarin reveal. I was livid. I was livid. But of course, the MCU course corrected that with Shang-Chi. We're talking about Iron Man 3 here for a second, because you made the observation that Mark and Steven are going to, at least for a little bit of time, going to have to do this, possibly without Moon Knight having that persona and having those powers. Well, Iron Man 3 kind of plays into that idea because Tony Stark loses everything towards the beginning of the movie. He pokes a stick at a terrorist, and gets his home blown up. All his suits are destroyed, loses everything really. And so Iron Man 3, I will give it to the director that they do a pretty decent job, at least outlining who Tony Stark is without the Iron Man suit and how he's able to go through the movie. He's able to perform tasks and all that. And you see the man, you start to see more of the man behind the suit.
Yeah.
I think that's going to kind of play into effect with what we're going to see with Mark and Steven, is that we're really going to see Mark, I think more of Mark without Khonshu. And Mark and Steven are going to have to really learn to work together more and more and more and get along with each other better to accomplish the task that they need to accomplish. And then Layla's in the fold too. And so it's going to be interesting to see from here on out. Tucker, that's a great observation. But just to see what's going to happen. I don't know.
We always love doing our Spider-Man references, and just like the lesson that Tony Stark was trying to teach Peter in Homecoming, like I take take away the suit. What are you? And if you're nothing, if you think you're nothing without the suit, then you don't deserve the suit.
Yeah.
And so it kind of plays like your character, who you are, has to matter and not rely on the suit.
Right.
And so maybe we're going to get an episode or the rest of the series without maybe he does have the power still, but maybe we're going to see Mark and Steven really have to rely on each other with also Layla. I don't know, but I'm excited to see the rest of this, bro.
Yeah. And I always have one more thing, man. You always stir the pot, Tucker, man. Ducker. I don't know which one you are, Bucker. But no, that's so true that it's the show is great because I think mainly because of the great casting and the characters. But we've seen Moon Knight in action, but he has not been around for 30 minutes at a time. He's only around for a short amount of time to fight off some baddies, whatever the case is. But the show is so great, and just by the reviews and what we've been talking about, just because of the characters and the story. Moon Knight's awesome when he's in action. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah.
But man, the what we've been talking about, what we've been alluding to, referencing, that's the heart of this show so far. And I'm sure we'll get a lot more Moon Knight action. I know it's Moon Knight. People like their Marvel action, but watching some movie analysis about some of the movies that we love, superhero movies that we love, there's always there's a common theme or a common takeaway in all of these movie studies that we like to listen to. And it's like superhero movie studies, right?
Mm-hmm.
The action's cool. The superheroes are cool. But what makes the movie great and just so entertaining is just the characters, the people behind the hero.
Yeah. And
that's what we're seeing with Moon Knight. We're seeing these interesting characters, Mark and Steven, and the supporting characters as well do an excellent job. But that's so key and crucial. And that's what we love to do here on this podcast, that we break down characters. We study characters, we study the comic books, and not just because the superheroes are cool. We love cool.
Oh yeah.
Cool things, cool action. Love all that.
Yeah.
Mindless action, right? Sometimes. But it's the characters, it's the people, it's the human beings, it's the heart behind the hero. And that's what we're seeing here. So Tucker, I think I've bored our listeners enough. But dude, you've given some excellent observations on this episode, on this spoiler discussion. So we definitely encourage you all, if you have not seen the episode yet, go watch the episode, because some people like to listen to spoilers and then go watch. I know some people like that. That's okay, but y'all are very strange. But no, I love doing this with Tucker. It's great. We'll definitely keep these going. We've got 3 more episodes we're going to do discussions for. Just like Tucker said, also episode 4 should be up.
Yep.
I think around the time we're filming this, maybe a little bit after. I'm leaving him in control of that. But you all also, Tucker closes out with some housekeeping items. I mean, we got to remind our listeners and viewers, our travelers, our fellow travelers, right? We got to tell them about all the good stuff we got going on.
Totally. I mean, everything you said is amazing. I love doing this podcast with you, Christian, and just can't wait for the future. There's so many ideas and stuff and lessons to come. But yeah, so if you go to our link in our bio, you'll be able to jump onto our merch store, and we have many shirts up there now, more to come. Been thinking about what does a Moon Knight variant shirt look like in a traveler form, so that would be pretty cool. So you'll be able to check that out there. And as we close this episode, and Christian, I want you to do the 2 final words, the Moon Knight words.
Yeah.
But it makes me think that, Jesus, when he came to earth, grew up, he was one of us, fully God, fully man. He we've only seen a little bit of Moon Knight. There's moonlight in the show, but Moon Knight.
Sunday,
yeah, Sunday. But it's like with Moon Knight, we have only seen a chunk of it, but we really get in the heart behind the character. Yeah. And it's like with Jesus, it's not like he's out to just show off all of these miracles that he can do. It's like we really get to know who Jesus is with the heart behind him. And it just made me think of Jesus did perform miracles, but he wasn't here to just show off. He was here to do stuff with a purpose. And there
was a purpose. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it kind of reminds me of that. We've seen Moon Knight come out in his appearance for the purpose of getting through a scene to carry the story forward to help Mark and Steven or Layla. And so, but man, I'm excited. We have so much to come with this podcast, Lord willing. We're excited. Become a traveler today. And Christian, what are those 2 famous Moon Knight words?
Let's see. Episode 1. I know we're going with this, but it's later Gators.
Later Gators.
Welcome back to your universe. Thank you for tuning into today's special episode. Until next time, travelers,